Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where in the world you happen to be right now. Welcome to today's webcast, the Fully Optimized Data Center for Direct Bottom Line Impact. It's brought to you by Information Week, Pomeroy, and broadcast by United Business Media Limited. I'm Steve Kopsky. I'm a contributing editor for Information Week, and I'll be your moderator today. Just a couple of announcements before we start. The webcast contains audience polling, and these polling questions will appear in the slide presentation window sometimes when you least expect it. But when they do appear, please complete the poll and click on the Submit Answer button. You'll find that located on the polling slide window. And thanks in advance for your participation. We really appreciate it. Makes it a richer experience for everybody. You can also participate in the Q&A session that's going to take place at the end of the presentation by asking questions, and you can do this at any time during the webcast. Just type your question into the Ask a Question text area, click the Submit button, and at this time, we also recommend that you disable any pop-up blockers that may be running inside your browser. Now, the slides will advance automatically throughout the event. You can also download a copy of the slides by clicking on the Information button. You'll find that located at the bottom of your screen. And you may want to note that this webcast is being broadcast through a Flex console. This means you have more control and flexibility over your view and over the webcast tools. So you can resize the presentation window by dragging the windows from the corners. You'll also notice buttons at the bottom of your screen. You can feel free to click on any of those. That'll open supporting content and user tools in different panels. If you have any technical issues, you need technical assistance, just submit a question and open the Q&A panel to see whether any written responses have been posted back to you. We really value your feedback, and we use this to ensure that your webcasts improve over time to meet your needs. So when the feedback form arrives, please also participate in that by clicking on the Submit button. And with that, on to today's presentation. We are talking about the Fully Optimized Data Center from Direct Bottom Line Impact. And joining us today to discuss that, we have with us Stola Swift, and Stola is a Six Sigma Black Belt and ITIL version 3 Certified Practice Director for Remote Monitoring and Management. He brings with him over 25 years of successful business-to-business technology and management services. And that experience is crossing many industries, nonprofit organizations, and the United States military. Prior to joining Pomeroy, he held management positions at CompuCom, Lucent, Inacom, and Wachovia Corporation following his service in the U.S. Army. And Stola, we thank you for your service and welcome you to the webcast today.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate the introduction. We're going to talk about today one of the areas of data center operations that's critical to information technology organizations' effectiveness, and that is a strong remote monitoring management team. Having great people watching many locations with various devices using proven processes. And then we're going to discuss the role of effectively utilizing this team in an IT service operations and how they can be integrated with engineering, operations, service desk, capacity performance management. An effective remote monitoring and management team can augment the IT operations staff in many areas. Their mission should be to monitor, restart, remediate, repair, and restore systems to a steady state in a timely and consistent manner. And then we're going to look at a few case studies and how the team can help drive bottom line results. And if effectively used, the RIM team can move your organization from a reactive to proactive partner in reducing outages by staying on top of the technical and business issues that impact your data center operations. And then we'll finish it up with some question and answers. Steve?
Yes, sir.
Okay. First polling question today is, what is your biggest concern relative to the infrastructure performance? And Steve's going to guide you through the polling.
Yes, thank you very much, Stola. So what we'd like to know is, in terms of your biggest concern relative to infrastructure performance, is it limited visibility into the current health of my infrastructure? Is it assessing the performance of my environment, reducing the number of incidents, or being more proactive and less reactive? And so if you would, mark your ballots now. We're going to give you just a moment to do that, and while we're doing that, so what do you find is the predominant concern as you're out there in the industry? What are people telling you?
Well, all of them are important, and we're starting to see some of the results coming in. But being more proactive and staying on top of the issues before they break out into a major, business incident. The purpose of a good, strong remote monitoring management team is to be providing that service around the clock, 7/24, and being able to address those issues as they occur instead of waiting, till the business is contacting you that there's an issue. So preventing that firefighting feel is probably one of the most important areas. Other areas that come into play that are important is just understanding what's going on in your organization. It's become a lot more complex, and being able to have a picture view of what's going on across the organization and gathering that information appropriately and then responding to it in a timely manner.
Okay. So we've got our results in here from today's audience, and far and away it's about being more proactive and less reactive, and of course that's the hard stuff. That's exactly probably why people are tuned in today, is to find out what tools and solutions and best practices are available to allow them to accomplish just this. Does this surprise you that that's where their sentiments are?
No, not really. I mean, from an incident management standpoint and an IT operations, if you can get on top of the the problem before it breaks out to be a major incident and keeping people informed, you might not be able to reduce the incidents, but if you have a good handle of what your infrastructure is doing, you can nip it off in the bud per se prior to something any major happening.
Okay. Very good. Well, please continue with your presentation.
Okay. We're going to move about what are some of the major trends and issues. When we talk to clients, these are the issues we hear most often. There's concerns that keep them up at night, and note that these issues are all interrelated. And I'm just going to go down and talk a little about each one a little bit. In the area of time, a great deal of outages we find occur after hours. Your staff is limited and not focused on the failure of a component or the device, and you come in the next morning and find that key system's not available. So customers and end users are impacted, and you're off to a bad day. So time is one of those considerations. The next area that we find when we go into a shop and talk to folks is understanding the confidence factor. Your environment may not be stable. Your performance is off, and you can't quite put your finger on the button. And you have to keep track of the key performance indicators that make up your business operation so you can figure out what's causing those stability issues. Then when we talk about process, we find a lot of organizations don't have standard practices, documentation, and processes in place to work on incidents. It's kind of a shooting from the hip kind of situation, and preventive maintenance we find is lacking, and there's patching not being performed, and the environment they're working in is not very well documented. So we find that as another area. Then we get into looking at kind of what I call a short-term mindset. They've been firefighting, the incident occurs, business is interrupted, the team is quickly focused on trying to get the infrastructure back to a steady state and then on to their next firefight, but how much effort is done looking back at the root cause analysis and looking at the top 10 problem areas or the top 10 types of incidents, creating standard workarounds. And for the repetitive items, is there a way to integrate automated scripting so that when it does occur, you go through a prescribed method of trying to remediate or restore back to a steady state. And then we look at legacy constraints. In today's world, the IT infrastructure is not just in one place. You have legacy data centers, co-locations, software as a service locations, and yes, we even have cloud locations. How do you look at your environment from a central viewpoint? And are you keeping an eye on your legacy assets while you're working towards moving towards a consumer-based services? And finally, but not, and probably most importantly, is that we're in a period of economic austerity. And in past, IT organizations purchased and staffed for all the services they supported. And in today's world, you need to have the ability to consume services through an operating expense model where the hardware and software and resources to support business services are paid for as you go. OpEx, or operating expense, or consumer-based utility model, or for infrastructure as a service, or software as a service, or cloud services, it's where you want to consume and not worry about staffing and skill sets, but just providing service to your client. So this is your environment. It's not just the network. Some of it could be on-site, some off-site, some via software as a service or infrastructure as a service. And the edge network is your routers and switches and hubs and data and voice communications. It could be your main distribution facilities or interim distribution facilities. This is what we traditionally thought of a NOC as being looking at. But you also have the security layer that also includes firewall, intrusion detection, intrusion prevention, and web content filtering, spam filters, and various appliances that you need to have in place to protect your corporate users and information. Then you have your infrastructure layer. Traditionally, the data center, where the server closets and disaster recovery locations. You had cloud computing sites where servers and storage and systems are hosted. Then you have your application and databases that are not only on the servers and storage, but now being hosted in other facilities, in cloud locations, and they're being provided to your end users. And then you have email being outsourced, your SAP services hosted off-site, and you have legacy applications in the data center, and you've just purchased software as a service on a pay-as-you-go for dashboard and analytics because it's easier to view your information. Then you have your end-user computing environment, traditionally a terminal or a desktop computer, then the laptop, and now the mobile computing device that's gathering snippets of information from here and there so you can keep informed and connected, and that you can make more decisions with better information. This is where the virtual desktop and enterprise mobility and bring your own device come into play. They all need to be monitored and managed. Consumers of all information want more self-service, and this group is more savvy. Needs for information for just in time, and it's more cost-effective to have dedicated resources on site. They're used to using kiosks or service areas where they bring in their devices, drop it off, and pick it up an hour after a break. And they needs to be a balance for your organization where you have dedicated and shared resources working together both on-site and off-site with smarter tools like password reset and knowledge bases tuned into your business needs. Remote monitoring management fits in to augment an on-premise team. They are typically shared resources working together with the IT stakeholder, managing incidents and remediating, restoring, and returning systems to a steady state in a timely manner. And working in conjunction with an on-site team and self-service, using a RIM team is a great way to drive down your operating expense while at the same time increasing your uptime while you're trying to provide better service to your customer. And you need to move from to a proactive team from being a reactive group. You've come in the next morning, the outage that occurred the night before has been fixed, and all systems are go, and you're ready to do business.
You know, one of the questions that has already come in from the audience, Stola, is you know, they hear references to cost savings, and where do those come in? This looks like an area of exactly where you could see some real impact on the bottom line.
Yeah, and what I look at it from cost savings is not just in people. If you have a 1,000-person organization and you look at the average burn time of that group, as far as from a consuming IT services, and if there's an interruption in that business, and you look at the hourly rate of the people for a 10 or 15-minute outage, and you can bring that outage down to 5 minutes, that is a cost that you're reducing. So it's not just in the people side of it.
Okay. Yep. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So moving on, we look at remote monitoring management has to have some sort of framework because you have multiple stakeholders now having to work together, and ITIL is a great framework, and we have in front of us right now the ITIL framework is really popular where IT organizations can align themselves. They've been doing a lot of these services over the years. They've just come together and been put into a framework that's specific and measurable, achievable, realistic, and bound by time. And RIM services focus in the area of service operations, returning incidents to a steady state. And they're capable of dealing with both incident management, event management, and problem management. Our goal in IT is to bring order to chaos, and you need to inspect what you expect. And to do so, you have to lay out what you have and look for some gaps. So the first thing is to inventory your business functions being provided by your organization, and then the technologies that make up those business containers. Then next, look at the tools that you have to monitor these technologies. You need tools that will monitor hardware, software, and applications providing the support to the business. You need tools that provide what we call simple network management protocol or Windows management instrumentation, as well as log or file monitoring. And all these tools will generate alerts once a threshold is met. Then these alerts need to move into a ticketing system to capture that information so as to understand what work was done to establish service levels and restore service back to a steady state. And then to get a better picture of what's going on, you need to take the information from these tools and ticketing systems and move them into some sort of dashboard for data and analytics to present the information so as to make sense of what's really going on. Looking for indicators and drivers to put attention to. Operationally, you need to organize your team to deliver services to your end users, integrating your IT staff, service providers, and subcontractors and such, working towards a common goal. And then with governance and service level management and operations procedures that are documented and staffed appropriately to deliver this service. In this framework, we've taken the ITIL service operations and standard procedures and laid out a framework for providing what we call RIM services to various organizations. It's repeatable, it's scalable, it's standardized, it's specific, and can be used over and over. We're going to just walk through a quick incident. So we start with a request for service in P100 where information comes in through an alert or a telephone or an email from either a device or an end user. And that incident resolver in P200 takes that information, categorizes the information, and attempts to both restart, recover, or resolve the incident in, let's say, in this case, the first 15 minutes. They also, at the same time, will do what we call a business and technology impact to identify the severity of the incident that's occurring. Is it impacting an individual, a group, or an organization? If they're not able to resolve it within the service level objectives, then that incident is moved to an engineering group in L2. And in the L2 arena, we give them an additional hour to resolve the incident. They have additional skill sets and knowledge and information to remediate, restore, and resolve, as well as start to bring in the business stakeholders. And this is where the incident awareness comes into play. So the technical team focuses on restoration of the technical services when the business team starts to bring in and focus on restoration of the business services. If that individual is not able to, or group is not able to resolve that incident, they're going to bring in a more qualified skill set that might be a subject matter expert. And that expert could be a stakeholder or an individual or resource located on-site or off-site, but their information is forwarded to them with access to the appropriate technical devices to remediate, repair, or develop some sort of workaround. They're also the same kind of group that will probably do what we call root cause analysis or after the incident's closed to figure out what really was the cause. On occasion, we're not able to resolve the incidents remotely. We might have to put what we call smart hands and feet or dispatch a resource to replace parts or to do on-site diagnostic information. And so we'll dispatch the resource out, and normally that takes place 4 hours, 8 hours, next business day, where they basically work to, replace or swap out the device and get business and technology back going again. The information then moves into a problem area if it can't be resolved for beyond the first day, and we bring in the change management or an IMAC team if we have to make changes to the environment. So here's one of our first case studies. In this situation, we had a major metropolitan airport, and they were dealing with consolidation, security, high availability, multiple stakeholders, with engineering and subcontractors and various delivery organizations having to provide a service to the airport. And the solution that they had to come up with was build out new facilities, build a standardized operational model acceptable to all stakeholders, develop a series of standard operating procedures for all vendors, implement what we're calling a total call ownership for incident management, where the technical incident resolver follows the incident from start to closure, so they could provide real-time communications through the web to multiple, to stakeholders. As a result, we implemented a 24/7 secure monitoring and management team. And then we developed standard operating procedures that were followed by all stakeholders and all vendors. We then also put in the total call ownership process with real-time access to key information and ticketing, so that all information was being shared real-time and decisions could be made in a timely manner. Steve, I'm going to turn you over for the polling.
Okay. The question we have here is, which infrastructure monitoring approach best describes your company? Is it on-site monitoring and management on an 8x5 basis? Is it management and monitoring on a 7/24 basis? On-site? Are you doing it off-site on a 7x24 basis? Or is it a mixed model featuring on-site and off-site support on a 7x24 basis? And if you would mark your ballots, we would appreciate it. We want to get a sense of where you are on this. And as you're out there, talking with real customers, is it a real mixed bag, Stola, or do you see some patterns? I would imagine, it really varies by industry and size of company.
You hit it on the nail. It's really industry and size of company and where technology fits in their business practice. We find a lot of organizations, with an 8-to-5 type of operations, and where RIM services are come into play, where we see the biggest bang for a buck is augmenting an existing staff that has an 8-to-5 operations with, after-hour operations. And so we take on the after hours while they're taking on the day shift, or we'll take on the first tier of support, so that they can focus their attention somewhere else.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and push these results out, and I think what we are finding primarily is, if I can get to the right slide here for you, is that it is primarily a mixture of just generally a mixed bag of on-site and off-site support. Though primarily on a 24/7, you see a lot fewer that are doing it only 8-to-5, and relatively few, only 10%, that are doing around-the-clock monitoring off-site. So most people, it would appear, are doing 24/7, and they're doing a mixture of on-site and off-site.
Yeah, and that's what we see, and it is tied with the size of the organization. And the ability to bring in, and that's where RIM services, because they're focused in a shared model, working with a dedicated on-site model, so that they can share best practices across, that we receive working on multiple accounts across the industry. So that's where some of the best value is in bringing this together.
Okay.
So, all right, I'm going to move on to the next slide here. So we're going to look at another case study. And in this one, we had a specialty vehicle manufacturer. It was a great business. It was growing. It was in a remote location, and they found it difficult to obtain resources. And as a growing and changing business, they also were lacking some standard processes. So they're getting ready to expand the business model, but the IT organization needed assistance in their growth. And so the solution that we put together was to augment their on-site team with a remote monitoring and a remote engineering group, and allow that team to focus on sustainment operations, and current staff will focus on growing the business or transforming their services. We located also the remote operations center in an area that was better staffed to support, the engineering services. And as a result, the remote monitoring and management was put in place quickly, in about 45 to 60 days. The company now is focusing on growing. We're providing real-time dashboard analytics, so we're able to inspect what we expect. We've identified a number of projects that have been then laid out, and moving from what we would call a reactive service to a proactive, because they really now have full-time 24/7 monitoring in place.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So how do you go about doing that, and where do you start? And the best thing to do is with some sort of assessment. You need to have a baseline for your current operations. And you need to look at defining what the mutual goals and objectives will be, develop some sort of roadmap or gap analysis, and then map and understand where you are and where you want to go, and then break it into these 4 key areas. Look at your people and resources and how they're allocated and the skill sets and experience, and identify the shortfalls. Look at the places where your tools and technology need to be put in place to monitor and manage. Where's the business containers being laid out? Which, is it just your data center, or is it the infrastructure of a service, or is it software as a service? Or do you have the ability to see into what's going on? And then you need to have an inventory of what is it that you want to look at. And we talked about earlier, it was that networking layer, the security layer, the application operations. And then you need to lay out some processes and looking at how do you operate, how are they documented, are they executable, are they scalable, and when you're looking at working with the people side of it, not just your own people, but also look at the people, your subcontractors, your partners, those folks that are helping you, provide that service, because they all need to work off the same sheet of music. In our case study here, we had a situation where we had deteriorating performance and the legacy supplier issues, and the business was changing, but the supplier wasn't. When we looked at it, the communication and processes were somewhat outdated. There were some performance issues related to the technology, but the client wasn't able to quite put their finger on it. And so the solution was we did an operational and network assessment. And then we identified that we would implement an on-site team augmented with a 24/7 RIM service, and in addition look at adding some remote engineering to handle major incidents. And develop a series of standard operating procedures, and we improved stakeholder communications. And then we identified a number of initiatives that the client then reviewed and looked at where they could implement to improve the stability of their network. And as a result, we have a more stabilized environment. We have reduced critical incidents. We have proactive management versus reacting when they come in the morning, and they can see in real time what's going on and where they need to put their attention. So we talked about indicators or dashboards or key performance, and when we look at it, we need to set up indicators or measurements or metrics that provide information to 3 groups of first, the executives, the management, and also those that deliver the work. And at the executive level, they need some sort of summary that gives them an overall health of not only the business but the technology, and they need to look at trends and directions. And that information needs to be pushed out to them, via email, as well as provided through some sort of self-service portal. When we look at the management layer, they need to look at, it's a little bit more granular, modular in nature. It gives them indicators, directions, or areas to focus. And in this case, we had 2 spikes, so we needed to look at making business adjustments and adjust the people so that they could, have better staffing where the needs were happening. And in here, we're looking at tickets by time of day, and you can see there's a fair amount of activity occurring after hours. And so we just moved some of the staffing around. Then we get into the engineering level. And in their case, they need real-time information with detailed reporting. They need to have the ability to have interactive web consoles where they can, have their pulse on looking at performance, capacity, and, monitoring details, as well as providing real-time access anytime, anywhere, on any device. So they're kept in touch of what's going on. So the bottom line is you need to have the right people at the right place at the right time doing the right things the right way. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Steve, for the survey.
Okay, fantastic. So we have one additional question for you, and that is, with the fully optimized data center, bring order into chaos with remote monitoring management for direct bottom line, that's our subject today. So on a scale of 1 to 5, if I have the right poll in front of you, if you could rate the content for this event, and also rate the quality of the speakers, rate the presentation material, and did you experience any technical difficulties? These are some of the things that we'd like to get from you before we go on to our Q&A for the day. And I'll give you just a minute to fill that out, and then we're going to start taking some questions. And am I in sync with you on this, Stola, where we are in the presentation?
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. All right, I want to thank everybody for taking a moment to do that. And with that, let's look into the question queue. And I want to remind you that there is time to submit some more questions. We've gotten some fantastic questions already. We really do appreciate your interaction in that way. And want to let you know if we can't get to to everybody's question in the course of this live webcast, then we certainly will make sure that you get personalized follow-up. But the first question is coming from Valerian in the audience. Says, can you provide me with a copy of the presentation? And I do want to just point out that several people had asked that. You can download a copy of that slide set yourself. Just access the Slides tab down at the bottom, and I think, in fact, take a look at those different tabs down there. You'll see that there's quite a few resources available to you. But we do appreciate that question. Now, there was a question that was from Rod in the audience that said, do you include the management of rules for the 3 types of management that you discuss?
Management of rules for 3 types of management. All the information is put together in what we call a service manual and a service definition guide. And that information then is reviewed with the client, and the thresholds or the rules are then laid out, agreed upon by all stakeholders, and then implemented into the system, and then timers and thresholds are set, and then managed to it. Short answer is yes, but I was just giving a little background on how we would do it. Okay. All right. That's perfect. Now, there was a particular slide, the Bring Order to Chaos slide, and we have a question related to that. I don't think we need to pull it up. Vince in the audience asks, what does DR stand for? Is that disaster recovery? That is disaster recovery. So typically in most organizations there is some sort of disaster recovery plan. It is usually an off-site facility, and in a lot of cases we'll find that there's some equipment that is seated there, so we'll be monitoring that environment in addition to the traditional environments because it is part of the business operations. Okay, very good. Now, this question is coming in from Brian in the audience. Is when a company moves from managing its own infrastructure to doing it remotely, what's involved? How long does it usually take to do that transition? Okay, so a typical transition can take anywhere between 45 and 90 days, depending on the size of the organization and how well the organization has their processes documented and the amount of equipment that is being asked to monitor. But that's on the average Basically, we start with a baseline, some sort of assessment. We have some assumptions that we build around, and we do what we call a pilot, pause, ramp, and roll. So we'll start with a pilot. We'll put in the technology, gather the information, review it with the client. We'll then move out to monitor a handful of devices and get the processes in place and make sure all stakeholders are comfortable with what the rollout program is. And then we'll implement over the course of the period of time additional monitoring for additional devices and scale the operations.
Okay. And still, I'm kind of curious. You have a background in the military, and a lot of this sounds like some of the best practices that the military probably is, or at least should be employing. Can you draw some examples from that, or how does that inform your work and the product design that you've got here?
A lot of the activities are the same. It's best practices. It's documented processes and procedures. There's a lot of logistics and coordination. There's a lot of things regarding development of standard operating procedures, project management, project methodology. All those things come into play, and so they can be just transformed over into, providing, service delivery.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense, and I think that's a great model to emulate. Now, another question from Anwar in the audience: do you require any agents in the infrastructure to remotely monitor the infrastructure?
As a default, no. We talked about it earlier. Is that the machines today, or the devices today, generate what they call simple network management protocol. So they're broadcasting this information automatically, or WMI, Windows Management Instructions. And basically, we put in a listening device that sits on the network and gathers that information. There are on occasions where we have remote devices where we might have to put an agent on, but as a default, most of the tools today are agentless, and we'll gather information in that manner.
Okay. Terrific. That's a great question and great answer. Gerald in the audience, what is the MM tool being used? The RMM tool, I'm sorry.
There's always a series of a combination. The one we use today as a default is a product called Level Platforms. It works, it's what we would call an element manager. It has a listening server that goes on the client. That information is then shared back through a secure connection into our remote operations center. And then that information is then put in what we call a presentation view or a web portal so that all the stakeholders are able to see. And then on the back end, there's usually a reporting, data, and analytics that presents that information from an end user standpoint.
Okay. Very good. Another question from an individual in the audience, and I'm probably going to murder your first name. I do apologize, but it looks like Tajaraj, and asking, what are the tool sets that are used in RMM, and bringing them into BYOD, or bring your own device, what kind of integration challenges do you see in terms of security? And this is on a lot of people's minds these days.
Yeah, so when we look at the area of remote monitoring and management, and when we see bring your own device, that was where we look at virtual desktop, mobile computing, and the traditional legacy desktop, and then you have now smartphones and smart devices. And so we're finding that in a lot of the cases that you have to deploy an agent into the smartphone that will allow the individual to have, it's usually a personal device, and we want to segment the business portion of that regarding what we call maybe an IT container or business container on that device. And then basically you isolate the business activity. That agent creates policies and procedures that define what is being deployed. So it's kind of like your own private application store where you can manage and push information out. You can wipe that information in the event that the device is compromised, and that information then is sent back to a central site where a remote monitoring management team has to take on, restoration of services in the case there's an outage, or tracking the device, or wiping the device, or working with service providers various service providers if there's issues in the wireless arena.
Okay, great question. Another question, this is from Karen in the audience. What do you look for, that is, what are your requirements when you bring on people to do this type of data center monitoring? I guess whether internal or external. Are you looking for a specific type of individual?
It's a various type of individual. Our group is, I would call it, somewhat eclectic in nature in the sense that they come from different backgrounds. They have our analysts, which are our level 1 resources. Their background, they've been in the industry for 3 to 5 years. They have operational data center operations experience. They have networking, server, desktop skill sets and certifications. And then we look at our engineering group, and our engineering group probably has 5 to 7 years of data center. And then we look at our consulting engineers, and they're probably 7 to 15 years of experience. And they provide our subject matter expertise.
Okay. Very good. Now, just time for a few more questions. And this one I've got a little window that's popped up in front of my question and answer area, so it's making it a little hard to read. But if I'm the only one that's supporting a say an 8x5 monitoring infrastructure, what are some of the concerns that I should have, and maybe what are some of the signs that it's time to get some outside help and to call on a partner or a company like Pomeroy?
It goes back. I was going to try to see if I can bring up slide number 7 again. And if you look at that, the slide number 7 is the major trends and issues. Why would you want to talk about it? Are you facing, do you have time issues where a lot of the things are happening after hours, but you don't understand it? Are you being approached because your management team has, is there a confidence issue? Are you really lacking processes? And is this a way to help transform your business and move it up a step or optimize your infrastructure? Or do you have a short-term mindset where you're basically firefighting and you're not able to get ahead of the problems, but you're always behind? Or there's a lot of legacy constraints where you're looking at transforming your business and you might want to have someone like Pomeroy to focus on their legacy infrastructure as you're migrating to moving towards your, maybe of a consumer-based infrastructure or utility. Or are you just facing some austerity, economic austerity issues? And those are just some of the things that, that's why I popped that slide back up is, some of the driving factors.
Okay. And second part of that question is, if you're in an 8-to-5 monitoring infrastructure, how do you cost justify going to 24/7? This is a little bit of a different question.
Yeah. So you look at go back to those that information. Is you look at some of your outages, and you look at, can I offset some of my costs? Do I have a stable environment? Are a lot of things happening after hours? Per se, so that I really don't have a good handle of what's going on, and and you look at some of those, and you look at your current staffing, and do you need to look at having them do something else, or augment the team, and can you reduce staffing to some extent and augment it with a remote team that's a shared resources working with an on-site mixed dedicated resource team.
Okay. Very interesting. And another question coming in from Brent in the audience. How long is the typical project lifespan for, say, a typical DC automation project?
Okay, a data center automation project. Again, the project, probably there's 2 to 3 months of evaluation, and then there's a decision, and the project transition will take place somewhere between 45 and 90 days, depending on the size of the organization. And normally the engagements or the relationship is a minimum of 3 years, with a lot of them moving, as the relationship grows, it transforms and, could go as much as 5 to 7 years.
Okay. And do you have some references for the implementations?
Yes, we do. We highlighted some of the case studies at a high level that we could reference. But another way to do it, depending on where your organization is at, is to and the size and where the seriousness is to look at maybe a network assessment. Try sometimes it needs to try it in the environment. Pick 100 devices. Let's look at it and see if it would fit for your environment. But yes, we do have references.
Okay, and this will probably be our final question for the day, and it's coming in from Phyllis in the audience. Can you please throw some light on the ROI issue? What is the return on investment here, and how do you calculate that?
A couple different ways. It could be as far as reduced outages. If you don't have measurements and metrics, that's part of the network assessment, doing a baseline. What we normally see when we start these projects is a huge increase in the ticket volume because we're actually measuring and capturing information that in the past hasn't been captured. And then we look at it by reduced tickets, and the reduced tickets mean reduced outages. And so that is, from a savings, that savings could be anywhere between 10 and 20%, depending on how do you look at an outage, as well as looking at augmenting your staffing. If you're doing with the on-site staffing, and we can do it more cost-effectively off-site or remote, that might be another way for you to save money. Okay, very good. Well, I want to thank everyone for the great questions that they had for us today, and really great answers as well. And I think that a lot of information here, and obviously is very, very top of mind with our audience today. Now, if you'd like any additional information related to today's webcast, you can visit any of the resource links, and these can be opened by clicking on the information icon that you see at the bottom of your presentation screen. Within the next 24 hours, you'll receive a personalized follow-up email. It'll have details and a link to today's presentation on demand. And with that, I'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation, The Fully Optimized Data Center for Direct Bottom Line Impact. It was brought to you by Pomeroy and broadcast by Information Week. This webcast is copyright 2012 by United Business Media, LLC. The presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted, if that's the case, by Information Week and Pomeroy, who are solely responsible for their content. And the individual speakers, such as myself, we are solely responsible for our content and opinions. On behalf of our guest today, Stola Swift, I'm Steve Kovsky. Thanks for your time, and have a great day.